So welcome to this session on social distancing. This is just to clarify Woodcraft folks' recommendations and requirements when it comes to social distancing as groups begin to plan about reopening. We will clarify what the government guidance means about 1 metre plus, and also explore how we can best manage circumstances where we can't maintain 2 metre social distancing. We'll end the session with sharing some links to other resources, and we will hopefully have a discussion about the types of activities we can do whilst maintaining social distancing. So, just to clarify, at this moment in time, Woodcraft folk groups in England can begin to meet from the 4th of July. We are recommending that those activities are outdoors as that reduces risk. All activities, whether or not indoors or outdoors, are required to be delivered under social distancing, and that's social distancing of 2 metres between all participants, adults, children and individual children. All activities also need to have signage and joining instructions, being really clear with people that we need them to commit to staying 2 metres apart from each other wherever possible. Our recommendation is that we have to be, well, the requirement from the government guidance is that we need to work in small groups, no more than 15 children and young people, and that we are recommending that we organise these in clans of 6 people. That's 5 children or young people and 1 supervising adult. These clans are like the social bubbles that you will have heard about in the media that are being maintained in schools. We would like these clans to be consistent over the next coming weeks and months whilst we begin to work towards reopening and doing activities without social distancing. The reason for the bubbles is to reduce mixing of households. So whilst it is now permitted to mix households in a youth work setting, we need to try and make sure we reduce mixing as much as possible. So we need to maintain 2 metres whenever possible. Therefore, we need to make sure that when we are planning our activities, we think about how which activities can be best delivered with 2 metre distance. So no knife work activities with inexperienced members where you may feel that you need to step in and provide some support. If we are doing craft activities, these should be craft activities individuals can do on their own without the requirement of an adult or another child to support them in these activities. The games that we play must be non-contact, and therefore we need to think very carefully of what activities would be suitable for this new outdoor social distancing world that we're about to enter. There are, of course, occasions when social distancing doesn't work. The first one of those is around first aid and personal care. Now, in Woodcraft folk, most of our members are independent and are not requiring personal care because they're slightly bigger. But we may all, adults or children, require first aid. And in these instances, you cannot give first aid 2 metres apart. You are required to have additional PPE to protect you and the individual who requires the first aid. There are also times when supporting vulnerable children or children with additional needs where we need to consider reducing that social distance. And we need to make sure that we are managing risk as much as possible. The other time when we can't do social distancing is when we're transporting children. At this moment in time, we're not recommending that we transport children and that activities are local. And if we can't get there by foot or individuals can't drive themselves there, then we need to consider whether or not the activities should go ahead at this time and maybe delay it until later. I'm interested to know what other circumstances people think that they can't do social distancing. So if there's anybody on here who can think of occasions more than first aid, personal care and supporting vulnerable children and transport where they can't maintain social distancing. Is there anybody who's got a suggestion? If you have a suggestion, stick it in the chat. I'm aware that there will be some venues which make it hard to do social distancing, and therefore we need to put into place, if we're going to be indoors, systems for managing people in, say, bathrooms or managing people in corridors. There will be lots of properties opening up this weekend who will be introducing one-way systems and limiting the numbers of individuals going into rooms so that we can continue to maintain that 2-metre social distance. In Woodcraft Folk, our recommendation is that we do activities outside, which gives us a little bit more space, and we're not constrained by doors, walls, and other furniture. As no suggestions have come into the chat, I think we've probably listed the places where we can't do social distancing. Some of you will have seen in the government announcements this thing called 1 metre plus. 1 metre plus doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing 2 metre distancing. 1 metre plus is that in those circumstances where 2 metres is not possible, we need to have additional safeguards. That's what the plus is. And those additional safeguards is about personal protective equipment, whether or not that's face coverings, face shields, gloves. They've talked about people working in offices, working back to back. That is incredibly difficult, I think, to do in a Woodcraft Folk setting, as well as having additional cleaning. But at this time, the requirement under the National Youth Agency guidance is that we should continue to plan to be 2 metres apart wherever possible. The question is, will this change? It probably will change. And it is interesting yesterday that the Scottish Government announced that children under the age of 11 can now play outside with other households, but not socially distanced. Now, playing as individual households is different for organised youth work activities, and it will be interesting to see what guidance is issued by Youth Link Scotland when youth work can begin in Scotland. It currently can't, and we're expecting that announcement to come later in July. But at this moment in time, the requirement for youth work is that youth work should be delivered 2 metres apart. If this changes, we will contact all groups and districts and give them updated guidance. So what's important is to think about the types of activities we can do outdoors, socially distanced, in clans. A very quick thought: scavenger hunts, capture the flag is always a popular game at camp. Walks and hikes, whether or not they're penny hikes or rainbow walks, leaf walks, track and trail activities. Bingo, sitting still, listening and playing bingo. Doing environmental craft. When we're doing craft activities, we need to consider the equipment needed. Our recommendation at the moment is that we should not be sharing craft equipment between a group of people, and therefore we need to consider things that are equipment light but are still fun and engaging. Things like mini den building, where you gather your own resources from the environment that you're in. I had a conversation yesterday with a member from Bristol who was sharing party games that they can play. I'm interested if there are people on the call who've had a thought about other activities that they would like to run socially distanced. Is there anybody on the call who would like to share their ideas and suggestions? Come on, don't be shy. Pippa, I'm going to unmute you. You can tell us all about that. Pippa, you'll need to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
We quite often at camp will do natural sculpture where you can do it individually or in groups. Obviously, at the moment, individually would be better. And you make a sculpture out of leaves or sticks or anything that you can find in the natural environment. And you either make a picture or a 3D sculpture, and then people just can go around and look at other people. So that's something I think would work quite well as a socially distanced activity.
Adam in Cardiff is agreeing you. He says it works very well, and he's just given us a little bit of a smiley face in the chat. Thank you, Adam. I think environmental art, environmental craft, and all of those things where you can gather your resources from your environment helps, because it reduces that need to have equipment. Is there anybody else who'd like to share some suggestions about things that they think that their district or their group would like to try to do socially distanced? I'll take the silence as no, but hopefully maybe you will feel brave enough to share a bit later. We do have some volunteers who are spending some time writing. Could someone explain? Pippa's asking to explain I'm a bean. This is a terrible explanation. I'm sure there's a better explanation somewhere else. You stand around 2 meters apart from everybody, and there is a caller of the game who shouts out, I'm a runner bean, and you run on the spot as a runner bean. Or they shout out, I'm a jumping bean, and you jump around, clearly 2 meters apart from everybody else. And you shout out, I'm a chili bean, and I don't know, do you shiver and shake as if you're freezing as a chili bean? I'm not sure. Hopefully that gives you a brief description, Pippa. You can make it up as you go along. Thank you, Pippa. I'm glad. There are, as I said, there are some volunteers who have been writing some session plans, and we are populating the Dream Big at Home website with activities. These are going live this weekend, so if you go there now, you will find about 10. If you go there on Monday, you will find about 60. We are trying to gather as many activities as possible that you can do with your group in a minimum size of 6 people, and also maybe with up to 15 people that you can do 2 meters apart with limited equipment, or just people bringing their own pencil along to the activity. So do look at that website. If you forget this URL, just simply look at Dream Big Activities, and there is a filter system where you can filter by the type of activity. You can filter whether or not that's indoors, outdoors, online, a group online, or a group outdoors. So do look at that. Also on the Dream Big at Home website, under running a group, there are some example session plans under a socially distanced tag, which you can also visit. We will be welcoming all suggestions and feedback, and very soon on the Dream Big at Home website, there will be a template where people can populate their own ideas to share with people. And I think that will be a really valuable resource for the movement. Whilst you're planning about reopening, there are some web pages I recommend that you look at. The first one is Woodcraft Folks' coronavirus reopening page, and on there you will find downloadable templates of the posters that we need to display. These posters are about washing our hands, about remembering the standard coronavirus prevention of making sure that if we sneeze, we use a tissue and we throw it away in the bin, making sure that we stay 2 meters apart, and making sure that we don't attend if we have any known symptoms. There's also a website by the National Youth Agency and UK Youth called Youth Work Support, and on that website there are resources from other youth organisations about social distance activities and other training resources which you might find valuable. On the NYA website itself, they are publishing every week readiness levels under /guidance, and there you will see what's permitted and if there are any changes to either the size of group permitted or whether or not there's any changes to social distancing. As an organisation, Woodcraft Folk will be monitoring that guidance and will be sending that out to groups and districts as and when it's updated. But for the time being, in England, from the 4th of July, groups of 15 is what's permitted. If you're in Scotland, YouthLink Scotland also has a coronavirus guidance page, which is the youth body for youth work in Scotland. Scotland is slightly being more cautious in its reopening and therefore is a few weeks behind England, but the guidance is very, very similar, so that when sports and leisure activities are permitted by the Scottish Government, youth work and therefore Woodcraft Folk activities can begin, but we're not quite there yet. The other place for guidance on what's permitted and what's not permitted is the government's coronavirus website. You can also find some more training from Woodcraft Folk. So you can see our safeguarding film at woodcraft.org.uk/safeguarding. And we also have a series of other webinars, which is on our training page. So there's webinars to do with online safety if you're going to continue to deliver virtual program. And there's activities around webinars on risk assessment, making reasonable adjustment, as well as our roadmap to reopening, infection control. And this webinar will also be on that page when we have finished it. Are there any questions at this stage? I know it's a really quick webinar, just to remind people that when the government says 2 metres, that's what we're required to do. We do recognise that there are incidences where we cannot achieve 2 metres, and in those circumstances we can be closer, but we must have other precautions in place to protect our volunteers and our young members. And those are really around first aid and incidences that are based on the specific needs of individual children, particularly vulnerable children and those with additional support needs. Are there any comments or questions coming in through the chat box? No? If you have any questions at a later date, if you email safeguarding@woodcraft.org.uk, we will get back to you as quickly as we possibly can. That email is checked daily and there will be a response. No questions from Adam. Good, thank you, Adam. And then you will also have been sent this week as group leaders and district safeguarding leads and district contacts a very simple table of what we're currently permitted to do, which lists 10 things that we are required to have in place before we meet face to face, as well as some recommended practice. And the recommended practice is just that. It's stuff that's recommended because we recognise it reduces risks. You're not required to do it, but the stuff that is required, if you don't do that, then we are in breach of our insurance and in breach of the current coronavirus guidance being issued by the government. As a youth organisation, Woodcraft Folk is following the guidance issued by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, as well as the Department for Education. Now, the two departments met today for the first time to make sure that their guidance actually says the same thing, which is a step forward. And just to remind you all that if you are looking for guidance, the place for Woodcraft Folk to look is woodcraft.org.uk/COVID 19-reopening, and there you will find example risk assessments which you're required to do before we reopen, links to the training as well as the guidance to reopening. On that webpage are also the template posters that we're required to print and display, and you will find links to the government guidance for both Wales, Scotland and England to make sure that we're complying with everything local. If there are no questions, that's all I've got to say. No Woodcraft Folk group has to meet right now. These are tools for those groups who feel in a position to do so. We want every group to go at the pace that is right for their members. If you are going, we want to make sure that all the volunteer team and the parents and the children are confident that the safeguards are in place. Please do not feel pressured to do something until you're ready, but now is the right time to start having the conversations about when the local situation is right for groups to resume. The guidance that we're issuing is based on the national guidance, and we need to be mindful of local situations and local lockdowns that may be introduced because infection rates are higher in some geographical parts of the country than others. I'd like to thank you all for your commitment to the organisation and for the efforts that we're going to try and deliver services and activities to children and young people. So thank you all. If you have any questions, by all means get back to me at safeguarding@woodcraft.org.uk and we will answer those questions as soon as we can. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. And until we're advised otherwise, all activities face-to-face must be delivered at 2 meters socially distanced.